Hello and welcome back again to Whiskey Reviews with me, the Whiskey Novice. Now, if you have been watching these videos, I've been trying to explain through the first few anyway that I'm recording about some of the terminologies used in whiskey and things which are said and which aren't always explained. And what I will say this time is we've moved out of Ireland. This is review number 8, I believe, and we've moved to Scotland, to Islay to be precise, and Bruichladdich Distillery. Now, make yourselves comfortable, ladies and gentlemen, because this may be a long one, because this bottle in its own ticks an awful lot of terminology boxes, as far as I'm concerned. There'll be pronunciations, there will be things said, and I'll try to explain them as best I can. So, let's get into it. As I say, we've come over to Scotland, we're at Islay. Now, what I'm going to do is, in my next few reviews, not this one, I'm going to start and do a tour of the areas and regions of Scotch whisky, the 5 or 6, depending on what way you want to look at it, regions of Scotch whisky. But this isn't going to be part of that series of reviews. I'll come back to Islay for another one. This time I'm doing this one, and the reason I'm doing this one is, as I say, this is a big box ticking exercise. This is from Islay. You'll see it is spelled I-S-L-A-Y, and that is Islay. It's not Islay, it's not Islay. If you are talking to whiskey people, it is Islay. And this is from the Bruichladdich Distillery. And this is the Classic Laddie. And it is an unpeated single malt Scotch. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into what unpeated means. I hit earlier on in one of my earlier videos about the drying of the malt, of the barley. And I said there was various ways of drying it, and this is where you hit on peat. Now, the reason they state on this that it's unpeated is Islay is known for its peated whiskies. But as I say, in my next few videos, I'm going to do a tour of the Scottish regions of Scotch whisky. At that point, I'll be hitting on a peated whisky, and at that point, I'll explain more about peated whisky. So, it's a non-peated, it's a non-age statement. Now, this is something you will hear a lot of whiskey people talking about, non-age statement whiskey. What does that mean? It means there's no age statement on here. This isn't you will see whiskies with 12, 10, 15, 21. Basically, that is the age. That is the youngest whiskey that is in that bottle. And that's the length of time it has been matured in a cask. And in the case of Scotch whisky, that has to be used oak. Okay, it has to be started in used oak, and it has to be matured for at least 3 years. Same can be said. Scottish and Irish whisky has to be matured for at least 3 years for it to be considered whisky. So this is non-age statement. Why non-age statement? Why not keep all our whisky and put it out at an age statement? Well, there's a few reasons, and I'm not going to hit on them all. I'll give you a couple. One, it gives distilleries the opportunity to put out young whisky, which the buyers will probably generally not sell on the same. You know, for example, I mean, for them to put this out and say they could put this out at 3 years. Sorry, I forgot to pour myself some. They could put that out technically, by law, at 3 years and say it's whisky. And there's nothing to say that there isn't 3-year-old whisky in this, because there's literally nothing to say there isn't 3-year-old whisky in this. You know, I can't suggest what age the whisky is in this, but that's one reason to have a non-age statement. It gives you the opportunity to put out young whisky. It also gives you the opportunity to put out whiskey that has been maybe matured in casks that are maybe third or fourth fill, because the casks are brought in. Mostly you'll find Scotch whiskies are matured in ex-bourbon casks, obviously American ex-bourbon casks, and once they're charred, and once they're used, once maybe you reuse them again and maybe again and again, but after time, the more you use them, the less effect they have on the whiskey itself, because obviously they're being reused. The soakage in the barrel and the wood becomes less and less, and the barrel, as I say, starts to have less effect on the whiskey. So that's another reason why you might find non-aged statement. It's basically an opportunity for distillers to put out whiskey that doesn't have the same time and maybe the same, I wouldn't say effort, because this is still good whiskey. They're still putting the effort in. Just, you'll find most distillers have a non-aged statement whiskey. It is also, you'll see, that's the other thing you'll notice with this, whereas most of the other whiskies that have been reviewing so far have very little reading on them. If they read like a postage stamp, this is War and Peace, because there's stuff everywhere. Not only is there stuff everywhere, but there's even more on the tin that it came in, and it is just a dictionary of what this bottle does. So it also states on it somewhere in the slightly smaller print here, distilled, matured and bottled, until filtered. Now that's something else you're going to hear a lot of people in whiskey world talking about, and you'll hear it, unchill filtered. What does chill filtered mean if it's non-chill filtered? Well, chill filtration is basically where they take the contents of the barrel, and they chill it. I think in the case of malt, they chill it till about freezing point, almost freezing point. It thickens the whiskey anyway, and when they thicken it, then it's filtered through fine filtration, fine mesh, fine filtration paper, and it takes out impurities. It takes out oily fats and esters and stuff like that there. And basically what these oily fats and things do is, when the whiskey's cooled, say if you put ice in your whiskey, then it'll start to cloud, because that is the impurities in it bunching together and they make the whiskey look cloudy. So the reason a whiskey would be chill filtered is basically cosmetic reasons. The distiller thinks that a cloudy whiskey is a bad look and doesn't like it, so they filter that out, and it makes the whiskey. Now, you're not going to find lumps floating in this, or you're not going to find bits of wood or anything like that there floating. But as I say, if you bring this below a certain temperature, even adding water, once the whiskey, once the whiskey's over 46% ABV and non-chill filtered, if you cool it down, it'll start to cloud, and they call it Scotch mist. It's just a nickname for it. And as I say, distillers do it for cosmetic reasons, because they think that people don't like to see cloudy whiskey. And I mean, there is an old rule of thought, I suppose, that states that. So it's non-chill filtered and colouring free. So what does colouring free mean? Well, it also means then that it is the colour that came out of the barrel, basically. Now, you can't see that in that bottle, because obviously you can't see anything in that bottle, which you will find that a lot of distillers, when they don't colour their whiskey, they put it in an opaque bottle or a coloured bottle, so you can't see the colour of the whiskey. So it doesn't matter whether it's been coloured or not, until you put it in the glass, you don't see what colour it is. And more seasoned whiskey people now seem to be leaning toward non-chill filtered, non-coloured, and to prove this now, this is the colour of this whiskey, and as you can see, it's pretty clear. That's the colour that has come out of the barrel, and it's pretty light. Most people who don't necessarily drink whiskey as often think whiskey's that colour. Now, it's maybe hard to tell, but there's the difference. And now you can maybe see the difference in them. If I hold them against my shirt. This is the colour that people think whiskey should be. This is probably more the colour it is. Now, that being said, barrels have an awful effect on it. This is this is another 12-year-old Islay. I'm not going to say which one it is, but there's been colouring added to this. What they add is a colouring called E150A. It's a caramel colouring, and depending on how much you add, you know, it can well eventually taint the whiskey, because there is an ever so slight flavour of it. But this yet again is cosmetic. This is because the distiller thinks that this is the colour people want whiskey to be. This is the colour they think it is, and you'll find ones that are much darker than this, whereas this is probably more likely the colour that it is. Now, as I said before, there's a good chance this is fairly young, you know, and this is why it's non-age statement. It's bottled at 50%, which is close to some cask strength whiskies. You usually find they start around 54, so it's getting on, so it's high ABV. But as I say, this colouring is its natural colour out of the barrel, and that's it. So listen, I've ticked a few boxes there that you will hear. That's a lot of terminology that you will hear in the whiskey world. Peated, unpeated, some you'll hear a lot. Non-age statement, if you see it written down, NAS, in capital letters generally, that's what NAS means. It means non-age statement. Non-chill filtered, non-coloured, or natural coloured, you'll hear things like that. And that's, you know, that's quite a few boxes ticked there. So let's look at this whiskey, because it has to get a review while we're doing it. It's a heavy whiskey. I find it's very, very spirit driven, as in the spirit jumps forward. It's there's quite a bit of nip, alcoholic nip with it. I did the same again. Now I'm actually starting to get into these whiskies better for the sake of these reviews, that I'm still adding and taking away while I'm doing this, while I'm recording this. But at the same time, I did pour myself some of this yesterday and write down some notes, for the simple fact that we're getting into whiskies now that are a bit heavier. They're a bit, let's say heavy going, but there's just an awful lot going on in them. And to sit and try and pick those things out just while I'm recording it, I was finding more and more difficult. So I thought, right, well, I have to go in here and start and find some, see what I can find in this. So this here, say, very, very spirit driven. I could review this whiskey again next week and give it a totally different review, for the simple fact that I've never really settled with this one. I find it very, very hard to find notes in it that I genuinely like, or that stand out, or that spirit driven. Tobacco leaf, a lot of tobacco leaf, barley sugar, hints of coffee, because there's a bitterness with it. Sourness. It's sweet. This is why I say the barley sugar, where it's sweet, but there's bitter and sour notes as well, and vegetation. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because I'm really picking off notes. It's quite bright. Let's just go into the palate. Yeah, it's really warm, bright, lot of, I always find quite a lot of alcoholic burden to this, but it all hangs around for a while. There's a hint of orange, as I say, still bitter notes on it. Bittersweet, sweet and sour even. And the finish just goes on and on and on. Almost it almost takes your breath away. You know, it's quite a hefty finish. It also, as I say, is balled at 50%. So it can take a drop of water, in my opinion, and it can take quite a drop of water. So as you can see, that was a good 2/3 of a teaspoonful of it in there. It's, as I say, that even now adding water brings out a detergent thing on it almost. Like, not bleach, like a swimming pool, like a public swimming pool, that chlorophyll. Somebody will correct me on that. Still quite sugary. All the water has shifted all the heat, all the alcoholic burn right to the back. So the delivery becomes very, very short, very quick, and then the development and the finish become the two overpowering things. You know, there's and the coffee tends to sit more on the back of the palate. I find this a very, very strange whiskey. The other thing I've found about this whiskey is that I've watched, read, seen quite a few reviews on this, and very, very few tally up. You know, so it's one that splits the crowd too. It's generally seems to be fairly well thought of, but I think people all have the same opinion on it, that it's quite hard to nail what it is. It's not unpleasant. It's not, by any means, it's not the worst whiskey in the world. That finish, especially after adding water, the finish is long, and actually, and this was something I noticed yesterday and I'm still noticing today, it's so long, it's almost too long, that it becomes bitter and just hangs around and won't go away, but won't become anything either. And it's not necessarily then, I don't necessarily want to go back for more because of that, you know. Said, not a bad whiskey. Just Bruichladdich are a hell of a distillery. They make an awful lot of whiskies. They're very well thought of, and no doubt I'll be back with other Bruichladdich. This one, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do. What I've actually decided to do was, even though I said I was never going to rate whiskies, I decided I wasn't going to rate whiskies. It's not what I do. I've changed my mind completely and decided that I'm going to now rate whiskies, and I'll just give them stars out of 10, and we're generally talking probably, most will be, I would think, from 5 to 10, but you just don't know what can drop below that. And this one, excuse me, I've decided, based mostly on its presentation. Now, when you hear people talking about presentation, they're talking about what percentage is put out at, is it chill filter, is it not chill filter, is it colour, you know, all that is taken into presentation. And this is, barring the fact that it's a non-aged stable whiskey, is presented very well. There's no denying that it's presented very well. It's just, to me, a bit bitter, a bit, you know, doesn't really sit anywhere in particular. So I'm going to give Bruichladdich Classic Laddie Scottish barley, to give it its full title. 7 out of 10. So there you are, there's my first rating. And it's this one, 7 out of 10. And obviously I'm 8 reviews in, so there's 7 whiskies prior to this which I haven't yet rated. So if you hang around at the end of this video, I'll do 7 little chopped ratings for the 7 whiskies that have come previous to this. So that's it. I think I've ticked off an awful lot of terminology there, and I don't want any questions asked in future now. So I'll leave it at that and say, here's to your good health. Cheers. Bushmills Original or White Label. Still not, in my opinion, a great whiskey. 5.5 out of 10. Bushmills Red Bush. Simple, but I quite like the taste of it. 6.5 out of 10. Black Bush, wouldn't be one of my favourites. 6 out of 10. Bushmills 10-year-old, very nice. Irish single malt, 8 out of 10. Bushmills 12-year-old, not really my cup of tea. 7.5 out of 10. Tailing single grain, very nice single grain, 8 out of 10. Redbreast 12-year-old, 8.5 out of 10, all day long. Hey, thanks for watching my video. Please click and subscribe to be notified of further content.